How was your off season?
It was great. Obviously very long, too long. Just poured into my family, a lot, after the draft process and summer league, and celebrated my son's 10th birthday, which was a blast. I turned 40 a couple of weeks ago, so kept it pretty low key there, but just family time, and then just, working with a new coaching staff, getting everyone up to speed on, what we're going to be doing this year. It was busy, had my pockets, some downtime, but definitely my mind can't shut off. That's one of my blessings and curses.
Yeah. One of the things that I know you had a chance to talk to Pete Pranica as we were preparing for the Countdown to Camp series, and what came out of that was that you're a constant learner. Like, it's always an adjustment you're willing to make. You're always uncovering the next thing that you can help get you better, and you share that with the team. How has Taylor Jenkins gotten better this offseason? What were some of the things you worked on yourself as you got this new coaching staff integrated?
Yeah, Mike, I mean, it's I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it's all about finding a competitive edge.
Yeah.
Where can we find another competitive advantage? And it's not just a reflection of last season. Everyone's going to be looking, oh, man, it was a tough season. We didn't make the playoffs and injuries, this and that. There's still something to be gained from that. There's still something to be gained from 2-3 years ago when we found some, version of success, but it wasn't good enough. So, if I'm going to challenge these guys to sacrifice more, be more competitive, be more willing to improve day in, day out, I have to do that myself. Obviously, I took a lot of, time to think about our offense, think about our defense. Obviously, new voices that are coming on our coaching staff are going to support that. How we view player development is something that's been on my mind a lot. How are we actually getting the collective, working in the same direction? Obviously, we want these guys to get better individually. They're all going to have their different player development plans. But if we're going to play the brand of basketball we want to play, where it's interchangeable, positionless, playing fast, playing off each other with better feel and anticipation, then we've got to drill that, or we've got to just teach that better. So some is new terminology, some is new philosophy, but to set this team up for more success now and into the future, I've got to change. I got to think differently, and hopefully our staff embodies that, and ultimately our players going out there and owning it.
Yeah, and we always talk about leadership and taking that next step. Talk a little bit about the guys you'll lean on in terms of taking that next step from a leadership position on and off the court.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's everyone's shared responsibility. I want to make sure we have a team that embodies shared accountability. It's, holding yourself accountable, your teammates accountable, and them holding you accountable. I mean, we're going to end up having a full roster and a bunch of staff. We all have to do that. It's organizationally too. But, we had our team meeting earlier, and I challenged Dez, Ja, Jaren, Marcus, all four of those guys about the sacrifices they have to make, their willingness to, commit more to our culture and standards. They've done a great job of it, but how much more do they have to give? How much do we each have more to sacrifice and give to find a new level of success is what I was talking about. So we've defined, a winning recipe over the last couple of years, but it hasn't been good enough. So if we're truthful to that, then we have to be truthful to ourselves. So it's been great, not just having the State of the Union team meeting that I always kick off the season with, but tons of great one-on-ones with these guys over the course of the summer. And as I said, it all starts with me, my conversations with myself.
You mentioned a couple of times, even in your press conference earlier, the new faces on the coaching staff. We've heard guys talk about new philosophies, and it's all sort of vague now, right? Because we haven't actually seen it on the court. And I know you want to keep it like under wraps till the season gets started, but from the outside looking in, it looks like there's a lot of differences, maybe offensively, especially the way this Grizzlies team was going to look from previous seasons.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to still lean on a lot of the strengths. I mean, it's not we're just tearing everything up and throwing it out, but taking a look at, we've been good with our pace, but how can we even be more efficient? How can we be even more committed to that? The possessions game, we lean into that a little bit more at the end of last season, trying to go get some extra second chance opportunities. Obviously, that was a driver of our offensive success, but our half-court offense wasn't great. It was more of the possessions game. So still leaning into that, but then, what kind of principles are we going to be playing with? How are we going to play a style of basketball where we're creating advantages and constantly maintaining them? So it's going to be a lot more movement than we've been experiencing. We're still going to have, the elements of the pick and roll and the post-up game and the ISO game, because we got guys that are natural advantage creators. But how are we doing that on a 48-minute possession after possession, just anticipatory, nature? I'm using these phrases right now, but that's what I want to press upon our guys is if you're doing something, I'm doing this, and we're just constantly reading, reacting, that makes it so hard to distort, the defense. They're out of whack more than we are. But, our guys are in the embracing phase right now, which is exciting. And I've told them eventually there's a buy-in phase when you're seeing that this makes 100%. This is why it's going to drive our efficiency up on the offensive side. Oh, we can be great in pace. We can be great with our paint touches and our three-point execution, possessions, and so on and so forth. But then we ultimately own it because then we have to go play 29 other teams on a nightly basis. So our guys are excited about it because I think they all recognize it was time to do some things a little bit differently. So it can be philosophy, philosophy-based, but also how we teach it. And I'm excited about, as I mentioned, the coaching staff, the energy they're bringing in, how we're collectively designing the training sessions for our guys, whether it's individual, it's group, it's full team, how I've got to change my teaching style a little bit. I'm going into year 6 and still consider myself a young guy, in this position, but I've learned a lot and I still have a lot to learn, and it's on me to set the tone.
Is it also sort of just the nature of the modern NBA where, like, we can't just run pick and roll and look for a mismatch and you attack. Now you got to think of all these other ways to kind of rethink things.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at how you build your roster, I mean, obviously we're naturally going to be looking at, the rest of the league, especially the Western Conference, what are our threats, who we're going to compete with, to ultimately break through the Western Conference. But we're building a team with a lot of depth, a lot of versatility on both sides of the floor. Some, are strong in certain skills and specialists and, on the offensive side or defensive side. But how do we play complementary basketball? I mean, I think that's the name of the game, for us. And it allows you to adapt night to night, especially when you get into a 7-game series, game 1 different than 2, than 3, and they change, and you need to change. So how are we a little bit more progressive and forward thinking to how we navigate not just the lineups, but our offense? What are the tenets of our offense that are going to be applicable to this team versus that team? Or, hey, we thought this team was going to do this against us tonight, and they completely changed. Well, we're better prepared for it. So it's kind of that, we're talking about our shared cognition, how we share mentality of how we play out there no matter what the situation is.
And then at the end of the day, call 12. all of that makes sense. And then at the end of the day, hey, when you need it, you got one of the most dynamic players, point guards. I wanted to ask you about Ja. You talked a little bit about him downstairs too. Just the leadership, the attention to detail that he paid this offseason to get his body right, but also his mind right. How much growth do you see in Ja at this stage of his game and this stage of his career?
Yeah, a lot of growth. I mean, I think it was definitely a hard year for him. I've said that multiple times today. Obviously, he's well aware of it. But, when he got clearance middle of July to get back to what he loves to do is hoop and work on his game, he invested fully, not just with himself, but inviting teammates to work out with him. I think his presence, the last couple of weeks as he's been integrating with his teammates, has been awesome to see. The conversations I've had with him, he understands what's happened in the past, but he's solely focused on what this team can accomplish this year, how winning's the driver of everything, what he can control, within his own growth. Leadership, Elliot, as you talked about, is something that, he's definitely striving to press upon even more with his voice, his presence, whatever it is. All these guys are going to be leaders in their different, ways. But I see this, rejuvenation, this, level of intensity and focus from him. But he's also got to play with the joy that we're accustomed to seeing. That's what makes him so great. But he's got a lot in here and a lot here to offer, and excited to pull that out of him even more this year.
Yeah, and you talk about the depth of this basketball team, interchangeable parts. Talk a little bit about who can be the X factor for this basketball team this year, a guy you feel like can take that next step.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're going to record this and someone's going to be looking right now. So
nobody's watching.
We obviously know a lot's going to be asked of Ja and Dez and Marcus and Tripp. It's the rest of the group too. I mean, it's. I think we saw a lot of growth out of guys like Vince Williams, Gigi Jackson last year. Santi had an unbelievable summer. Scottie Pippen. I mean, our two ways with Scottie, Cam, and Jay. BC bouncing back. I wish I had Jake. Jake's growth this summer was phenomenal as well. Luke, coming back here. All these guys can be X factors, and that's the beautiful part of it. If they're focused on just impacting winning, whether that's something asked of them defensively, offensively, playing to their strengths, but also us pulling out a little bit more of them, the areas that they got get better at, who knows what's going to be asked of. It's a season question, but excited that all these guys can have an imprint game to game.
I know you love coaching and being a coach and everything that goes into coaching. And I went to the SEC Media Day, and Kirby Smart was talking about how they look at a different company every offseason to try to take principles from. So wondering what other coaches right now do you look at and think, oh, that's something interesting or different or new or something I admire?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely spent a lot of time, in the basketball world looking at, the rest of the league, trying to learn from my peers for sure. But, I definitely watch documentaries or interviews or, close-ups, one-on-ones with football coaches. I'm always fascinated about how football coaches operate, how they build their staff, how they go about game planning, how they go about just positional development. And then soccer, I've poured a lot into soccer, some of the top Champions League teams, European clubs, even some of the national teams. Watched a lot of the Euros this year, and just trying to get a feel for how they go about their season, how they go about their sport. When you look at basketball, even though it's different game, rims, goals, we're invasion sports. It's all about space. In soccer, it's about finding space, taking space, making the defense get distorted and finding more space. I look at hockey, watched a lot of hockey this year, how teams are constructed. So I'm always trying to pick things in my brain knowing at the end of the day, this is still basketball, and this this is what I love and this is what I've experienced in, but are there little nuggets I can get from soccer, hockey, football? Those are probably the sports I lean into the most.
All things equate to winning. Yep.